Hi again. I wanted to show you what's been happening with the seeds that I began to sprout last week. It's very exciting. This sunflower seed here has begun to come out of its shell. You can see the big part. This little rootlet has begun stretching out, and it's even got tiny little root hairs. You can see the little green leafy part coming directly out of the seed casing. And the stem of the sprout connects the leafy green part to what will be the root. And there's even little root hairs growing on that tiny root piece. I think this has lived as long as it can from the food that was inside of the seed shell and the water that I've been giving it. It's been about 4 days now, so it's ready for some soil. I'm going to put it into some potting soil in a little pot to let it keep growing from here. So I have filled a small pot with potting soil that has all of the nutrients that a tiny plant needs, which is not much when it's first growing. And what I'm going to do is plant that. I know that the root wants to go down into the soil to hold the stem and leaves up. So I'm going to make a hole with my finger that's about as long, a little bit longer than that root tip, and very gently tuck that root down in there. And then fill the hole back in. In about one more day, those leaves are going to be strong enough to push the rest of that seed shell off. And then you'll see they're going to open up and reach out to the sun. And once those green leaves start collecting some sunlight, they'll be able to help the plant make its own food. Do you remember the jar that I had sunflower seeds and mung beans in? And most of the mung beans sprouted. Most of the sunflowers floated on top, and a lot of them either didn't sprout or were slow to sprout. And part of it might be the mung bean has a much thinner skin around the seed. You can see how easily it slips off, and it's already slipped off these other two. The sunflowers were just a little slower. If you're sprouting beans or seeds at your house, remember to keep them in the dark. Keep them rinsed so they don't get funky and moldy, but keep them moist. They need a lot of consistent moisture. You see this root that got brown on the tip. That's one that probably dried out because I wasn't consistent or regular keeping it moist. But you see these others that did just fine, coming right out of the middle of that seed, the shell slipping off, the first little leaves beginning to sprout out of the seed food. Some people like to eat sprouts at this point, but I'm going to plant a lot of mine. Now here's the pot where I planted the sunflower seed earlier, and next to it I've put some other sunflower seeds that are beginning to sprout, and I'm going to experiment. I'm going to try something and watch to see what happens if I just lay these sunflower seeds on top of the soil. That is, if I don't poke that root, if I don't tuck that root down into the soil, I'm wondering if that baby plant is going to be able to find its way down into the soil to grow all by itself. So if the seeds had fallen out of the sunflower head and just landed on the ground like this, I'm curious. I wonder if they would be able to send their root down into the soil and still send their leaves up into the sun. So we'll check on this in a few days and see. What do you think? Here is another experiment that I did on my windowsill. This is a rose geranium, and the leaves, if you could rub the leaves, you would smell a wonderful rosy smell. This is a stem with leaves that I cut off of a much bigger plant, and I put the bottom of the stem, the cut part, in water. And you can see it's been about 4 weeks, about a month, and the bottom of the stem has grown its own roots. It has quite a lot of new roots into the water, and it's about ready to plant in soil. There was something else last week that I cut and put in water. It was the top of an old carrot, a sort of overgrown carrot that was too old and tough to eat, and I cut the stem part where the leaves meet the root, and I put that in water. You can see tiny little rootlets are beginning to grow, and leaves began to sprout off the top. Now, another plant you may have around that does this, that will make roots from the bottom of the stem, is a willow. This is a kind of a willow that grows in my yard in a wet, soggy place, and it loves the water. If you watched the video with my old friend Lois talking about finding water that's under the ground, she used a willow branch. This is a very water-loving plant, and it's easy to sprout a whole. I think this tree started as a single branch, like this one. This whole big tree started as a cutting from another willow that I just stuck into the ground in the wet puddle, and it sprouted new roots, and it has grown into its own little forest here. I see that this willow tree stem, right now the stem is holding up flowers and leaves. And the bees have really been in these willow flowers as the weather warms up. And the stem is pulling water up from the ground to support these new leaves and flowers growing. I think today's a good day to take a cutting and try to sprout a new willow branch in some water. So I'll get my clippers and do just that. Now I've put the cut end into a glass with some water, and I'll keep that water in there for a few weeks until I start to see some roots grow, and then I'll know that I can plant this in a new pot and grow a new willow tree. So I'm going to, because it already has green leaves on it, I'm going to keep it out in the sun. Those little new sprouts that started from seeds, I kept those in the dark. Now here are some stems of something else growing not up into the air but along the ground like some stems. This is called cleavers. Tug a little bit of this stem here. You can see it's got kind of a square stem instead of a round stem. And it grows a brand new stem with new leaves every spring, unlike the willow, which grows new leaves on its woody old stems like this plant. We have to be very careful walking around the woods where I live for this plant, especially this time of year when the new leaves are not so visible. Here are some just peeking out. Can you guess what this plant is? It's called poison oak. We say leaves of 3, let them be. This plant will make your skin itch for a long time if you touch its leaves. Some plants, like this Douglas fir, grow their new stem the same time that they're growing new leaves, but they keep their old leaves from last year. And some plants grow new stems and leaves alongside of their old leaves and stems, like this fern. This horsetail grows a brand new stem and leaf every spring, just like the cattails up in my pond. Cattails are another plant that loves the water. It has to have its roots in water in order to grow, and it grows new stems from the roots every spring. Can you see what these old stems are holding up? So they're last year's stems, and they're holding up those brown hot dog shapes are really full of thousands and thousands of seeds. And as that shape comes apart, each tiny seed has little white hairs that help the wind to blow them to new places. We can even reach out and break apart that package of seeds, and I can show you, if the wind picks up, how it just carries them away to grow in new places. So stems have a really important job: to hold leaves up to collect sunlight, to hold seeds up until they fall to grow in a new place, to carry water and nutrients to the rest of the plant, to hold flowers up where pollinators can find the nectar. Can you guess what this stem is holding up? I'll show you next time. If you're going to be in the Zoom class, you can tell me, and tell me too what you think this stem is holding. Until we see each other again, happy gardening. Bye.